Hey guys, welcome to the AUXposition. This is Phaetox here, joined by Epicadin, and we're going to be talking about the item changes that are hitting the PBE and that we've seen all of the red posts about, and professional players tweeting with complaints or praises, one or the other. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. If Chris would like to segue us into the items.
Video's not loading. There it goes.
Did it load? Do I have
No,
to start
no,
over?
no, that's good.
It's good? Okay.
Never will it start without a hitch. Alright, so we're gonna kind of go start with some of the item changes that are going to be happening on the PvE. I want to stress to everybody who's watching that these item changes are tentative about numbers, the way that they're implemented, and stuff like that. So it's really important that you don't take any of this stuff like it's 100% going to happen. Once again, it's all tentative, and it's solely Riot's discretion how these items are going to be implemented, or whether or not they're going to be implemented for that matter. But we're just going to
mainly going to talk about like the concepts about the item changes and what they plan to do, because how they go about doing it is one thing, but we can see what their intention is, so that's mainly what we're going to be talking about.
Right, and talking about how it's going to potentially shake up the meta. First and foremost, I personally do not agree with this drastic of a change in the middle of LCS splits. I think it changes the face of the game just a little too much for something that's competitive where there's millions of dollars at stake potentially. So
yeah, previously they used to do like little changes, like, or they'd even add in new items, but they'd do it like one at a time, or they would like do an item rework one at a time during a split, and that's fine, or they would wait for like in between the two splits to do a mass rework. But this is kind of like smack dab in the middle, so it's not much precedent for how to go about this, but I guess they're intending on going forward with it, so we'll see what happens.
So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into some of these item changes. These are listed alphabetically, so we'll be going through most of them alphabetically, so just try to bear with us because it's going to be bouncing around just a little bit.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and start with Athene's Unholy Grail. Kind of everyone who plays right now is aware that the item was in need of some sort of nerf. It's pretty much built first on every mid laner in the game, almost. So, you know, it was not a lot of item and build variation. So Riot obviously has not liked that in the past, to where if you have a cookie cutter build every single game, they try to alter that and give you choices. So they went ahead and lowered the MR, lowered the mana regen, and then took that as an opportunity to increase the dangerous game-like passive on it, where you get the mana restoration on killer assist. It didn't go up much. It went from 12% to 15%, so overall it's a pretty generic nerf. Whether or not they're going to buff AP along with these changes is yet to be seen. They haven't announced that they're going to increase the AP on it, so for now we can just assume that it's pretty much a flat nerf.
Well, they did say that they wanted to create a tier system of a certain amount of AP and AD that you get for each level of item. Because you know you have like 3 different tiers of items. You got the
Right.
the regular, and then it upgrades into another item, and then that item upgrades into a
And
third item.
the AP tiers are 60, 80, 120 right now, and Athene's is on that 60, so I think they're probably going to leave it there. I mean, they might buff it up to the 80 to put it on par with Morello Namicon, but...
Speaking of Morellonomicon, I think it's actually a good opportunity to say that with an Unholy Grail's nerf, we've got Morellonomicon getting buffed. Which these two nerfs, like these two items hand in hand, are pretty much, they fill the same role that a champion gets, but each one of them has a, like, they're a little bit more niche, so they're going to be there's going to be a lot more choice involved with the buff that's happening to Morellonomicon, which is going to be they're increasing the ability power from 75 to 80, and they lowered the mana regeneration to 10 from 12. So this is going to help out, you know, you're going to want to get one or two of these items if you're playing mid, or potentially maybe Ceres.
Right.
But you're gonna get, like, you have a choice in which one of these you get. You're not, well, I guess I'm going
Athene's every single game, yeah.
right. I guess I'm going Athenes this game.
Because the only time anyone built Morello was just if they were against like an AD mid laner, or if they were behind on gold because Morello's cheaper. Now, that being said, like, we still have a little bit of MR on Athene's. It does give 25, 15 down from 40. but it's more expensive and gives you less AP compared to Morellonomicon. So I would foresee a lot more people starting to build that Morellos.
Yeah, I completely agree. So moving on, we have attack speed across the board is getting buffed in a sense. Things are going to cost a slight bit more, but it's going to give you more attack speed because Riot stated that they don't like how low itemized attack speed is because they feel like you just. So what they're going to be doing is buffing several attack speed items. Actually, they're going to be buffing every attack speed item across the board, from Dagger all the way up. So Berserker Greaves is going to be getting changed. It's now costs 50 gold more, and it's going to give you an additional 5% attack speed. There's not really much to talk about that. I don't see that shaking anything up, to be honest. With that said,
keep in mind though, like it's getting buffed, and people are like, "Oh, well, it's going up in gold too." But like 50 gold for 5% more attack speed is extremely cost efficient. Like, if you think like 50 gold is worth 5% attack speed, then the item as a whole would cost way less. But
the funny thing is the 50 gold that's going up is just the 50 gold that Dagger's now being increased by for the extra attack speed that Dagger.
Costs generally aren't getting changed.
Right. Dagger is going up in cost by 50 gold, and it's giving you 3% more attack speed, but that's just like a formality to set up all of the other attack speed items having the attack speed changed. Like Zeal, I believe, is actually getting decrease cost in gold by 75 gold, so it's now going to cost 1100, but its attack speed is getting increased to 20%. So, like I said, they're like in Zeal being your main attack speed item that builds into a lot of things. It's really important, or it's for ADCs at least, that item's going to be a little bit better for those champions.
Probably the most commonly built attack speed item bot lane because it can go into T-Force or Shiv or Phantom Dancer.
Right, and moving into our next set of items, we're going to talk about Bilgewater and Blade. Bilgewater Cutlass's lifesteal is getting lowered to 8% from 12. And Blade's getting some pretty substantial changes, but before that, let's talk about this little lifesteal change. The reason lifesteal's getting changed is they feel like lifesteal was coming a little bit too much abundant from the sources that it was coming from.
Yeah, not spread enough out across multiple smaller options. And so what they're doing with that is they're reverting the Doran's Blade back to how it was back in like Season 2, I think, to where it gives you lifesteal instead of on-hit healing. And they originally had changed that to what it is right now on live because of how the meta was back then, because you had like sustained supports like Sona, Soraka, Nami, well not Nami wasn't out then, but like healing supports and sustained supports were at an all-time high, so the lifesteal was pretty redundant, so they wanted to go ahead and nerf it at that point. But now we have a lot of aggressive supports, you know, we have poke-oriented supports and most of them aren't really healers. So now they're trying to bring lifesteal a little back in, especially after the nerfs to the lifesteal Quints. They're trying to balance everything out. So lifesteal is going back on the Doran's Blade, and they're trying to decrease how much like total lifesteal you get from just spamming into Bloodthirster and spread it across the other optional items that you can get.
Well, lifesteal across the board is getting nerfed. Like,
right.
Lifesteal from Vamp Scepter is going down 2%. Lifesteal from Bork is going down 5%. Bloodthirster's having the lifesteal. While it's being buffed, it's like you're no longer able to stack the lifesteal, so it's like a give and take kind of. So like they wanted less lifesteal overall across the board, but they didn't want you to be able to get so much so early. So I think that was like their main intentions around changing how it was.
Yeah, they're saying like, you know, sustain's important in lane, but if you go for sustain, if like you only need a little bit of sustain, we don't want to force you to have to buy a lot of sustain. We want you to put as little as needed into the gold cost of being able to sustain in the lane, and then going for what you actually want to buy. So like you can probably get away with, you know, like 1 or 2 Doran's Blades and then going straight into Infinity Edge, as you couldn't really do that before.
And that's what I actually foresee. Like I said, once again, everything's tentative, but as of things right now, like double Doran's into big damage item is probably what you're going to see, just because you're going to be able to get that stacking lifesteal, and it's going to be enough to sustain you versus which you see a lot of champions normally getting that early Vamp Scepter, which probably you won't see quite as much. But with that said, we're going to go ahead and move on to the Blade of the Ruined King changes. Now, Blade of the Ruined King is actually getting quite a bit of stuff happening to it. Like we said earlier, the lifesteal is being lowered by 5% from 15 to 10. The passive damage on hit is being increased from 5% of the target's current health to 8% of the target's current health. The active damage is being lowered to 10% of their maximum health from 15%. And the active movement speed slow is being reduced to 25% from 30%. Now, this shakes up the item quite a bit. Obviously, the main thing that you can see is it's really being nerfed for the AD casters that used it. Zed is the big one that comes to mind. He used to go. He probably still honestly is going to go. It's still 10% of their maximum health as on-hit damage. Is still pretty good. But it's being moved more to an auto attack type of champion item. I want to say Zephyrus said in response to some people asking questions about the items that Blade of the Ruined King was actually designed to be an item for bruisers. But
Yeah.
you know, and don't get me wrong, bruisers still love the item and still build it. You know, your Aurelia, your Jaxes. Some LCS players been building it on Renekton. Now I know all about that. Your Trundles, all of those champions that like your boozers that play top lane in the meta right now, like they all build Blade of the Ruined King, and it's working out pretty good for them. But also, now you see like your Ezreals, your Vaynes, a lot of your ADCs are building it, and it's not really an item that was designed to peel, like be a self-peeling item. It was to be an item that helped you stick on a target fleeing, which is something that a bruiser needed.
It's kind of hard for them to nerf one and not the other, so just by decreasing the movement speed slow from 30% to 25%, AD carries won't be able to kite as well with it, but also bruisers won't be able to quite chase as well down with it. But bruisers really only need that initial burst to catch onto someone. So they'll deal with the change better than the AD carries will.
Well, the other thing is like the on hit was such a little component to why ADCs got it. Like an ADC never said, "Well, I do a lot of on hit damage. Like I'm gonna get this." Like that was never the thought process of ADCs getting it. Like ADCs wanted the active so much. They wanted the lifesteal. They wanted the dueling potential in lane. But now with the power being shifted to the on hit, like what ADC is going to be like, yeah, I'm doing more percentage health with my auto, or I could just be doing 50 more damage per auto, because I do more damage if I went with a Bloodthirster builder or an IE build or something like that. So I honestly feel like a lot less ADCs are going to try to be going this item, and it's going to shift more into the bruiser, especially if they tweak the numbers a little bit more to make it, more bruiserish per se.
Yeah, and the on-hit damage scaling obviously scales with attack speed, so it is still really good on those auto-attack bruisers like you mentioned, Jax, Irelia, Trundle, and that archetype. So it's probably overall a buff for them, but just a nerf to us Zed players and some other AD casters that might enjoy. It's a slight nerf to the in the AD carries perspective, but for that Kog'Maw or something who actually cares about how much the on-hit percentage health damage does, maybe they'll enjoy it more.
Alright, we're going to go into a couple small changes real quick before we get into probably the most talked about changes. With Locket of the Iron Solari, the on use is now going to calculate the shield strength based on the recipient's level rather than the item owner's level. It's a slight buff. Supports are usually the lowest level in the team, so the shield's going to now be based off of the target who gets the shield. So it's it's a nice little quality of life change for the item.
Yeah, it'll make the shield a little bit stronger. So a little more bang for its buck.
Mikhail's Crucible, recipes getting changed, or the cost of gold is being increased pretty significantly. It's being increased by about 30%. It's going from 1,600 to 2,450. Riot felt like the item was being built a little too much on supports, and it was canceling a lot of catch potential and big plays that were being happen from people who were getting CC'd per se.
Yeah, it also was the rise of Mikhail's in popularity was a pretty big nerf to even trying to, they weren't popular to begin with, but people trying to play like Varus and Ashe, it completely shut down the utility AD carries because the support can just instant cleanse off that CC.
Right. So in compensation for the increase in gold, they're going to give it a little bit more mana regen from 10 to 20, and they're giving it cooldown reduction from 0 to 10%. So it's a little help offset the cost increase. But overall, we probably are going to see that a little bit less. I still think it's still a great buy for supports to get their ADCs out of a bind, literally. Um,
I like that one. That was good.
Forbidden Idol total cost is being decreased by 50. Nothing too drastic. It seems like they want it to be picked up a little bit more often, a little bit more accessible
Yeah,
in the
just
early
trying to
mid game.
build better into the recipes that they're using it to build into.
Um, Ghost Blade is now being 6 seconds for ranged champions, up from 4. They said that they're trying to do away with all of the differences between melee and ranged on uses. So that's just them, actively pursuing that venue that they said that they're going to
So
be.
the Twitch players who get Ghostblade or the Draven players will enjoy that change.
All right, and now we're gonna get into the set of the big changes.
The controversial.
All right, so to start it off, BF Sword's getting buffed. So it's getting changed. It's getting 5 more attack damage, but it's going to be costing a little bit more gold. I think they're reverting it back to the 1650 that it used to cost.
Not quite for certain. That's what it is on the PVE, but it might.
Right. Everything's
change.
tentative.
Yeah.
But with that BF Sword change, all 3 BF Sword items all 3 of the items that build out a BF Sword are getting changed as well. So Infinity Edge's attack damage is being increased to 80. Mercurial Scimitar's attack damage is being increased from 60 to 80.
Bloodthirster's gonna sit at a flat 80 now.
And Bloodthirster's going to set at a flat 80. And
So
Lifesteal.
they're all sit at 80, so they're trying to make it so BF Sword goes into these tier 3 AD items.
That all build up to 80 attack damage, trying to give you a little bit of choice in the item that you build. So that transitioning us into the Bloodthirster changes. Bloodthirster no longer stacks on minion kills, or champion kills, just kills in general. It gives you a flat 15% attack speed, a flat 80 attack damage, and it has a new unique passive. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the shield, where if you're at full life, obviously, lifesteal's not doing anything for you if you're sitting at full life, so now it'll give you a shield. And that shield goes, right now the numbers are at from 50 to 450, and it's kind of like a hyperbolic increase. It's like, it'll start really low and like increase by small amounts at low levels, and then once you get past like level 11 and into the higher levels, it'll start drastically going up in shield amounts. So it's not going to be a huge difference in laning phase, it's just going to be like a little small shield if they do end up rushing that BT. Overall though, I think the concept of the change is healthy because there's a couple things, like the stacking essence was a little bit toxic, obviously, because
This is my race. I need to stack my Bloodthirster.
yeah, once laning phase is over, you're competing for farm not because you need the gold, but because you need the stacks. And Riot didn't really like that idea, especially with how the professional scene has been lately, with all of the early like 4 manning towers, or like 2 of the people running around together in the jungle, or not laning, or just laning phase breaking really early. Whereas before, laning phase used to last a really long time, season 1, season 2, even early season 3. To where, getting those stacks was no problem, and like, yeah, you lost some of them if you died, and then Riot said, well, now you only lose half of them if you die, and now they're just saying, okay, you know what, the stacks just aren't healthy for the gameplay overall, so we're going to remove them. So you do get 10 higher base than you did before, so on initial purchase, obviously it's stronger, and the shield will be really good for trading in lane and stuff like that. We're not quite sure. It could be a bad thing, or it could be, a nice little trinket to have in the game, because depending on how quickly, they say that the shield decays if you haven't dealt or taken damage in the last X amount of seconds or whatever. So depending on what those final numbers are will depend, whether it's too toxic or if it's useless and not a big deal. So we'll just have to see where they go with that.
All right, and so that's a pretty big change. That's going to be that's going to create ripples at the very least. So moving on from that, we've got the Randuin's Omen changes. They are completely removing the movement speed slow from the hitting. So you used to on when hit by basic attack reduces the attacker's movement speed. Now it no longer does that, as well as the Warden's Mail. Um, at,
Yeah.
I mean the attack speed slow is being reduced by 5% as well. So
While
I
attack speed is also getting buffed, so
right. So yeah, attack speed's getting buffed. This attack speed slow is being reduced,
nerf
and the
and
movement speed slow from Wyndon's Omen's passive is being removed. So, like with the nerf on the blade and the nerf on this Randuin's, I feel like it's gonna make bruisers a lot harder to stick on ADCs in general. So,
yeah, I would agree. And Riot had mentioned that they didn't really like how when someone had Randuins, you would be punished for damaging them. It's kind of that like, oh well, they're front line, I need to kill them, but I'm getting punished for attacking them. So they thought that it was unhealthy in that sense, but that they agree that bruisers do need ways to stick onto their targets to be anti-carries, because that's what they're supposed to do. But they were talking in response to a lot of the community backlash for like, oh, you guys are nerfing bruisers so hard. They were saying, well, we're lowering the attack speed and we're removing the movement speed slow off of it. And if it looks like it's not strong enough, we'll buff like the defensive stats on it, like increase the health or the armor, or put a new passive on it or something like that. So they were talking about that they would maybe do some compensation buffs on Randuins and some other items as well, based on how it goes on the PBE and what the community backlash is going to be about it. Observe it a little bit on live, see how it goes.
and then finally, let's move on to the last two items that we have to talk about, which are the two brand new items.
Hooray.
We've got Ardent Sensor, which is going to be an item that builds out of Forbidden Idol and Aether Whisper,
Which are
Aether
two
Wisp.
relatively new items on their own.
Plus a 250 gold cost for a total cost of 1900. It's going to give you 30 AP, 10 MP5, 10% cooldown reduction, 8% movement speed, and a unique passive where your direct heals and shields on another champion grant them 25% attack speed for 6 seconds. I
So
like this item.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's mainly obviously meant for supports for the most part, where you have utility, maybe even like might try to populate support Oriana or something, but especially like Karma or champions that heal like Nami and stuff like that. It'll give you that extra oomph to like give your AD carry like, hey, not only am I healing you or giving you a shield, but now you have an attack speed steroid as well. It might be a little redundant on someone like Nidalee, but for a lot of the other supports will greatly benefit from this, and this is kind of going hand in hand with the attack speed buffs in general that we're seeing across the board. So they're just looking for a little bit of ways to improve, because they felt like Riot's stance was that they were saying the AD carries that were more caster and ratio oriented were completely dominating auto attack based carries like Tristana and who don't really have good ratios and just like to spam auto attacks. So the attack speed buffs and like this new item, stuff like that, is trying to even the playing field for the most part, is what they had in mind. Now whether that's exactly how it implements or not is yet to be seen, but with that being said, unless you have anything else to say about the item other than
Nah, I think it's a really cool item. Though I really think it's gonna have really fun interaction with like Karma Shield that shields the entire team.
Yeah, or like a Thresh throwing his lantern, getting a 5% attack speed buff off.
I mean, I just feel like that's gonna be a lot of battle stats at like Karma coming in, dropping an AOE shield, and then everybody on her team gets a 25% attack speed. It's like a mini Sivir ulti, like.
Yeah.
So so they're gonna get movement speed, a shield, and attack speed all from her one shield.
Yeah.
And then finally, we're moving on to the last item, Essence Reaver. Now, this is probably the change that I like the most between all of the items. It's an item that's been a long time coming.
It used to have slight variations of its passive on other items in the early seasons, but so its build path is Vamp, Scepter, and Pickaxe, plus 950 gold for total cost 2,650 gold. It is an AD item, so it'll give you 50 attack damage, 10% lifesteal, 10% cooldown reduction, and it has the grants mana on auto attack passive that used to be on Wit's End in days past. So the unique passive, you gain 2 to 8% of damage dealt by basic attacks as mana. Mana restore increases based on how much mana you are missing. So
now this item is going to create waves. in my opinion. I feel like it's a lot of the reason why you have such a stale top lane is because think about the champions that are particularly strong top lane are champions that statistically don't have any resources that they have to manage top lane. You've got Renekton, you've got Shyvana, you've got Trundle. Trundle a little bit. I mean,
Yeah, Trundle a little bit of an exception because he has the mana, but his mana costs are really low, and he doesn't really use 2 out of 4 of his spells for the most part in laning unless he's going all in or getting away from a gank. You don't use Pillar to trade with, but
this is going to help out those champions a lot. Or not those champions. It's going to help out the other champions who have to play against these resourceless or low mana cost champions against a lot.
yeah.
As well as it's probably going to see a little bit of ripple effect in like a couple ADCs who prioritize trading with mana.
So like Sivir, maybe Ezreal if people can be convinced to buy
I mean, I
on
think
him.
it's going to be a pretty good item on Ezreal, Lucian, Corki, champions who statistically spam a lot of their mana
Right.
to effectively trade in lane. It doesn't
'Cause now
cost
they
a
can
lot of
just
gold.
regenerate.
It doesn't. It costs 1,000 gold more than a BF sword. Gives you the same amount of AD, and it gives you 10% lifesteal, 10% cooldown reduction, and pretty much unlimited mana in lane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, assuming that these are the numbers they're gonna go with, so they might nerf it, make you not infinitely sustain, but I definitely think that it's gonna have more implications top lane than bot lane because, like you said, being a mana champion has pretty much been like, oh, you're gonna have a tough time top lane if you rely on mana. Like, you got Riven, you got Renekton, you got Shyvana, you got all of these resourceless champs, and it's just like, sorry, it's not an even playing field. We like having multiple resources in the game. Nothing to do about it for now. You're just gonna have to cry. But now it's like you can actually play those mana top lanes with this item, and it's not. The reason it's not like a tier 3 AD item is because they want it to be able to be that like mid-game, early tier, like top lane item that you just get to make sure that you can spam mana in the laning phase. So it's like it's a relatively cheap item. Bruisers can get it early on, as opposed to like rushing that Bork and then going full tank. They can get this and then go into their tank core, and they'll have a better laning phase, and it'll even the playing field for a lot of possible top laners, shift up the meta a bit. Maybe see some more Malphite or something. Who knows? Well, not this item. I wouldn't get this out of Malphite. That was a pretty, but popular mana top laners probably good on Irelia, Trundle, a couple other people that we might see. Maybe Jace will make the comeback into the top lane.
Maybe. But anyways, that's all we've got to do to talk about the PB item changes. Hope you guys enjoyed it and hope you learned a little bit about these potential tentative changes that are going to be happening. Is potential tentative like a double negative? Is like
Yeah.
super less chance.
And if you guys are really adamant about whether you like or dislike these changes, you can go on the Riot forums. They've been really good about responding to community feedback lately, especially on these changes. So try to get your word in there, or look for posts that you agree with, upvote or downvote them if you want them to get seen by the red posters. So.
And with that said, we're going to go ahead and pass it off to the casters. I don't think we have a particular topic that we're going to be talking about next week. We'll probably do a little bit of LCS into, I don't know. We'll post it on the Dwight Facebook.
Yeah, we'll advertise it.
We'll post it on the Dwight Facebook when we come over.
Ready.
And like I said, hope you guys had a good time watching. This is Phaetox and Epicadin out. Enjoy draft night.